there's a shelf life on some of these things. We always want evergreen, but that's a fallacy. We could get stuff that lasts longer. We could get press and stuff that, there's a likelihood or a probability if it's unpaid, status build stuff. It could last a while, but for the most part, it's a moving target. And that's why, looping back to it, having a clarity of where you want to go, what tree you want to climb. I mean, you can't climb multiple trees at once.
So let's start with a quote from an amazing Peter Drucker. He said, "The step ladder is gone. There's not even the implied structure of an industry rope ladder. It's more like vines and you bring your own machete."
I think having clarity of where you want to go is something that I, earlier on in my career and working with clients and consulting, was something that I looked at a lot, because it isn't necessarily a straight path, but the path can be mapped. So, like in Drucker's quote, he talks about bringing a machete. Like, the part of that is sometimes you have to go through certain obstacles just by sheer force and willpower. Sometimes that translates to money, actually just spending money, or buying your way into it, which, that's a lot of PR falls under that. Like, traditional PR falls under that category. But I love that quote as well, because it talks about vines. Vines mean an organic element. They're growing, they're moving, they could grow back. Some of them don't grow back. They could be climbed. Some of them shouldn't be climbed because they don't go high enough up. Like, I could extend the metaphor for days, but ultimately, the thinking about influence and status in the business world and treating it as a predictable revenue funnel is a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake because it's a constantly moving target. There are things that I earn, like earned media is a big phrase used in PR that I've earned years ago, and it's gone now. The places went out of business. It's gone. So there isn't really any evergreen, if you want to continue with the metaphor, sources of PR. There's always, because I've had people backlink to me that were like, page rank, 7 websites with a juicy backlink to some quote from an interview I did 5 years ago. And, they update their site and the backlink that disappears. There's just not a lot of permanence there. Now, the permanence tends to be with the association. It tends to be with who you're associating with. And that's also part of the organic game, because there are people that I've associated with in the past professionally that have fallen from grace, either because they fucked up, or their business model got kind of douchey, or they stopped climbing the ladder themselves. They just stopped caring. Like, it expired. There's a shelf life on some of these things. We always want evergreen, but that's a fallacy. We could get stuff that lasts longer. We could get press and stuff that, there's a likelihood or a probability if it's unpaid, status build stuff. It could last a while, but for the most part, it's a moving target. And that's why, looping back to it, having a clarity of where you want to go, what tree you want to climb. I mean, you can't climb multiple trees at once. There's a lot of different paths to get there, but it's not a marketing campaign. It's influence building, which means you need to. It's very much focused on the person, not the brand or the business. So is this person elevated, has climbed the tree, has scrambled through the jungle and climbed the tree, and is able to have higher level of status, or perhaps just a better perspective on something. There's people that I follow that and I respect that aren't that big of a deal. Like they've never been published in a big magazine. They've never been quoted anywhere. They've not written any thought leadership articles, or they've never been interviewed on a podcast, but their lofty perch, the tree that they sit atop, may just have a perspective or of a view that no one else has, like a very unique, like I just talked to someone the other day who uh spends a lot of time in kind of corporate training, and that gives him a lot of access to the executive suite. So he actually gets to hear what CEOs are saying. And even though this particular person isn't a big deal, it's that type of influence, though not public. Me forging a relationship with him is going to give me insight that I cannot get anywhere else. So there's different. That's why the clarity is so important. Like for me right now, I have my clear path of what I want to do with status and influence is I want to be on the top of the email marketing pyramid, right? I want to be on the top of that mountain. I want to own that and make it very difficult for any of my competitors to climb up next to me. And I've got a ways to go. I mean, if I actually mapped out like there's not a lot of there's just running with the vine metaphor again. There's not a lot of thickets or thorns or anything keeping my competitors from leapfrogging. I mean, I just had one of my own folks. Oh yeah, I totally met Neville Medora from the copywriting course and all that, and I'm like, he was really excited about it, and I was really like heartbroken. I'm like, like when did Neville started doing stuff again? And I wasn't even paying attention, and now he's like out and he's working it now. He's out there doing webinars and courses again, and he's more public now. And now he is legitimately a really good email copywriter, and it bothers me he's doing better than me. And so having that clear vision though that this is someone that I might need to find a different tree to climb, because they may not be possible or practical for me to be able to overshadow him. Seems like a really cool dude. I should probably become friends with him, but from a status perspective, if I want that number one spot, I might have to grab a different vine or cut his.